Slack stock has been talked about a ton recently, from Chamath being very bullish on this name to ARK Invest buying up literally hundreds of millions of dollars of this stock in recent weeks. But the question is, do they see something in Slack stock that we don't? Is Slack stock a 10x opportunity? Is this stock a buy? Well, it's no secret that Slack is set up for massive growth ahead. 39% growth predicted this year, another 30% predicted next year. So there's a lot of upside this business is expecting to realize. And honestly, there aren't too many opportunities like Slack out there in the market. You don't get a lot of businesses that have such high growth potential while being a business that's reputable, trustable, and ones that's backed up by some big name investors. So today, let's take the opportunity to discuss Slack in depth. Let's do an analysis video here on Slack, and that'll kind of give us a much better idea of where this business stands, not only from a business perspective, but also from an investment perspective. So I want to look at a few metrics here when it comes to Slack. I, of course, want to look at their revenue growth, which we just looked at. And on top of that, I want to look at their profitability, net income, gross margins, free cash flow, all that kind of stuff. And of course, my favorite metric for growth stocks, price to sales. We're going to look at all of this and more to determine if Slack is a worthwhile investment. Now, all I ask in return is if you could take a second, just smash that like button down below. It helps the channel tremendously, and every like is greatly appreciated. So since this stock IPO'd back in 2019, it has been on a consistent downward trend. It debuted on the market around $40 per share, and at its lows during the market crash, it hit around $15 per share, which is a 64% drop in less than a year. Since then, it has roared back with the rest of the market, but it has been fairly out of favor with investors and still sits well below its all-time highs and initial IPO price. The latest opportunity in Slack has come after they reported their earnings report, and as you can see here, the big dip in their stock price was when they reported, and honestly, it was not too bad, which is why so many investors and funds like ARK Invest seem to be using this as an opportunity to buy heavy into this business. We all know that guidance is important when it comes to stocks, and the market judges a stock based on guidance numbers. And while Slack actually had some pretty good news here, they came out with guidance and they actually raised their outlook, which as a potential investor is a positive sign for an investment. So interesting stuff, but before we move on further looking into Slack, let's take a second for today's video sponsor. Now guys, how often do you wake up in the morning and you find yourself kind of scattering through different websites to figure out what relevant business news happened in the last day or so? This is usually what I would do and what my mornings looked like before I came across Morning Brew, which is today's video sponsor. Now, Morning Brew is a completely free service, guys, and they provide you a newsletter from Monday to Saturday in your inbox waiting for you in the morning so you can read through news in a tabulated, well thought out form while sipping your coffee. This not only saves you time because it's all organized and presented in one single email, but it also keeps you well informed and educated with what's going on in the world around you so you can become a better investor. Recently, I found out that about 2,000 Robinhood accounts were compromised in a recent hacking spree, and I had no idea. And if you're a Robinhood investor, a service like Morning Brew will keep you on top of these things, help you stay informed, and provide information to you that matters. Now guys, I will leave a link in the description down below. It's going to be the first link down there. It's going to take you like 15 seconds to sign up, and I do highly recommend you check it out because like I said, it's free and it's going to make you a much more informed investor. Okay, so what is Slack at the end of the day? What value do they really provide to businesses that makes them such an interesting investment? Slack is a tool used by employers to enable their employees to work more efficiently by chatting, sharing, and integrating tools and apps to get things done. At the end of the day, Slack has a similar approach to other social media platforms because they want to keep their users on the platform as much as possible. We can see here that Slack publishes data on user engagement, and it's clear that since their global issue has hit, usage of Slack has increased notably. This is a good thing because it means more and more employees are getting adapted to Slack, which in turn makes it a much more sticky product. Because think of it this way, if an employee gets hooked on Slack and they move up higher into the company and then they decide to move jobs, join a competitor, join some other company, and that company isn't using Slack, there's a high chance that they will advocate and be like, guys, let's get Slack, let's get everyone on Slack. It's very efficient, love the platform, let's make it happen. And that's definitely a way that I can see Slack growing over time. But I think this is kind of a good opportunity to talk a little bit about Slack's main competitor, Microsoft Teams. Microsoft is big in this space because they offer many products for corporations, from Office to Outlook, and they can easily and seamlessly integrate Teams in there as well. This puts Slack in a big disadvantage because it's a standalone product, and from what I've seen, many companies that use Slack don't use Microsoft products. So Slack has a niche, but it is a smaller niche than what Microsoft is going after, because most large corporations, like I said, use Microsoft's products and as a result use Teams. Here is a look of Slack's recent customers from Q2 2020, and we can see some well-recognized and established companies here, but you'll notice that there's a common theme with these businesses. Many of them are new, innovative growth companies, and this is where Slack really shines. There's a lot of opportunity for Slack when it comes to new businesses and growing businesses, because the old established businesses that have been around for a while, have tens of thousands of employees, they typically are already very, very deep in the Microsoft ecosystem, and the chance of them switching over is very low. But because of Slack's approach, because of the way they built their platform, because of the way you communicate on Slack, it really appeals to these new companies, these new age startups, small growth companies, that kind of stuff, because the product, in my opinion, is built with millennials in mind, and it's typically millennials that are leading these type of businesses. Now I'll say this just as a side piece, I've seen both products personally, used both products as well, and I'll say that Slack is much more new generation friendly versus Teams. Teams is good for certain things, but if you're looking for an overall collaboration tool that has everything in there, then Slack is typically the way to go. But okay, the product itself, great, they have a good product. But how do their financials look? As of today, Slack is not profitable. However, they are inching closer and closer to profitability and could very well hit at least a quarter of profit sometime in 2021. Now, this is in large part thanks to their strong gross margins of 88%, which has been very consistent as the business continues to expand and grow. Gross margins of nearly 90% is what I think attracts many potential investors here, because not only are their gross margins strong, but their free cash flow keeps getting stronger, and if they're able to maintain these high margins, it would mean that profits would have a chance to exponentially increase as the company keeps growing. Oh, and FYI, here is their free cash flow, which has shown improvements quarter over quarter and has been positive for the last 2 quarters. And that's really the dream, right? A high growth company, massive potential, and they're growing profits. What's there not to love about that? So here's what I like so far. Slack is a high growing company and they have their niche. Small businesses, medium-sized businesses, startups, new innovative companies, those are the ones that Slack really goes after and tends to win more often than not. And then you couple that with high gross margins and positive free cash flow, and you have a winning formula for a future successful business. Now, what I don't like is that right now they're not profitable, they're losing money, and they have one of the largest companies in the world competing against them. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. There's always going to be that added pressure, and I think ultimately Slack will most likely either merge or get acquired by another software giant so that they can compete head to head with Teams and not only have to focus on that small, medium, niche part of the market. So what does their price to sales look like? I love this metric, so let's discuss it. The current market cap of Slack is $18.4 billion, and the next year's revenue estimate is expected to be around $1.13 billion. So doing some simple math, this gives us a forward price to sales of 16.3. 16.3? You're a subscriber of the channel, you know that's a little too steep for me. I look for price to sales for high growth businesses at a 4 or lower. That's when I find incredible value, but I will go up to like an 8, 10, somewhere around there if that business, in my opinion, is a leader and has a ton of potential ahead. Slack being at a 16 is definitely expensive and isn't something that I would buy at this price. So if I'm not going to buy Slack at these prices, what price would I be considering willing to pay for this business? Doesn't mean I will buy it, but what price would I consider buying it? Well, since Slack is high growth, you got to give them a bit more credit, you got to give them a bit more premium, so I'll keep that in mind when doing my calculations. So let's work backwards here to figure out what share price would make sense to me to consider Slack. With the price of sales of 10, which is on the higher end of where I would consider it, and next year's revenue estimate of 1.13 billion, Slack would need to be at around $11.3 billion market cap. Then to calculate the share price, we look at the shares outstanding, which is around 483.13 million, and then divide the market cap by this number, and this gives us a price per share of $23.39. Jumping back to the charts, Slack was roughly around this price point after their recent earnings report, and this is when ARK bought a ton of Slack stock. Clearly to me, ARK believes that a price sales of around a 10 is good value for Slack, considering its growth, considering its metrics, and like I said, I would tend to agree that this is around the valuation where I would consider it based on the numbers we looked at today. But now I want to loop back to the question I posed at the beginning of this video. Can Slack really be a 10x investment? Well, for that to happen at today's price, Slack would have to be nearly a $200 billion company, $184 billion if you want to be exact. That, in my opinion, is very far-fetched unless you're looking like 10, 20 years out, in which case there's probably better opportunities out there with other businesses that could, more than 10x your capital. I think a more fair valuation, at least for the next 5 years or so, for Slack would be around the $50 to $100 billion on the high-end market cap for this company. I think that we can definitely get in that range, and we can definitely sustain that range based on the metrics that I'm seeing and based on their gross margins, as long as they're able to keep that strong. So if Slack somehow gets back down to that $10 billion market cap range, which is about, $23, $24 per share, around that price, which we did see recently, so it's quite possible, then we could see a 10x opportunity at the most high-end bullish case for a $100 billion market cap in the next 5 years. Now, I know that I'm kind of stretching it here, and I know that I'm being extremely optimistic with that kind of outlook. More realistically, I think Slack will probably be closer to the $50 billion mark in the next 5 years or so, but you never know. Markets can sometimes be irrational. Slack can sometimes have some explosive growth. Maybe some large businesses move over from Teams over to Slack, and that could just propel the stock much higher. Either way, those are my thoughts on Slack. As I said, I am not buying the stock here today, but I would consider looking into this business if we see prices under that $25 per share price range. Until that happens though, I'm here happy sitting on the sidelines, grabbing my popcorn, just watching this play out. But anyways guys, let me know in the comment section down below, are you a shareholder of Slack? Are you buying Slack? Are you thinking of buying Slack? Did you sell out of Slack? Let me know all of that and more in the comment section down below. And again, make sure to check out our video sponsor. They help support the channel, so I'd truly appreciate it if you guys would just spend a couple minutes, check out their service, and I'm sure you'll love it. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to invest positively, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.